Dr. Jun Park stared at the shimmering energy barrier that separated him from freedom. 3 days ago, he had been collecting plant samples on the unexplored moon of Keros 7. Now he was specimen number 12H, the newest addition to a traveling menagerie of captive alien species. His prison was a hexagonal cell with transparent walls that allowed him to observe the corridor beyond. Similar cells lined the opposite wall, each containing creatures from across the galaxy. Some paced restlessly, others cowered in corners, a few hurled themselves repeatedly against the barriers only to be repelled by crackling energy fields. Jun did none of these things. He sat cross-legged on the floor, back straight, expression neutral. His scientific mind was already cataloging everything he saw. The Serathi moved with predatory grace through the corridors, tall and muscular with iridescent scaled skin in shades of copper, gold, and deep emerald. Their eyes were large, with vertical pupils that expanded and contracted as they moved between light and shadow. Each wore armor that appeared to be crafted from the hides of various creatures, adorned with trophies, claws, teeth, and strange crystalline formations. "The human remains inactive," remarked Raya, tapping notes into a glowing device. Her scales shimmered turquoise in the harsh lighting. She was shorter than most, with intricate patterns etched into the scales on her forearms, some kind of rank indicator, Jun guessed. A taller Serathi with a prominent scar running from her jaw to shoulder approached. The others immediately adjusted their postures, lowering their heads slightly and stepping back to create a path. "Is it damage?" she asked, examining Jun with piercing amber eyes. "No, Commander Tala. Its vital signs are optimal. It simply watches." Tala's spined crest rose slightly. "Interesting. The report said it fought during capture." "Vigorously," confirmed another huntress, touching a fresh wound on her arm. Then stopped completely once contained. No typical panic response. Jun maintained his calm demeanor, but his mind raced. They didn't know he could understand parts of their language. The translation implant in his inner ear, standard issue for xenobiologists, was converting their clicks and trills into comprehensible speech. Not perfectly, but enough to gather intelligence. The leader, Tala, approached the barrier, crouching to meet his eye level. Jun noticed the others watching with interest. This was unusual behavior for her. "You are the first of your kind we have encountered in this sector," she said slowly, as if unsure whether he could understand. "Your species designation." Jun considered his options, revealing his comprehension might be useful, but complete cooperation seemed unwise. He tilted his head, mimicking confusion. Tala made a sound, a dismissive click, and stood. "Begin standard intelligence assessment protocols tomorrow. I want to know how it compares to the Vordak specimens." After they left, Jun carefully examined his cell. The floor was smooth, slightly yielding under pressure. The air felt artificially processed, but contained adequate oxygen. A small alcove held a water dispenser and waste reclamation unit. The Serathi were efficient captors. That evening, 2 lower-ranked huntresses arrived with his first meal. They placed a tray in the small transfer slot, watching him warily as the inner shield momentarily deactivated to allow the food through. Jun examined the offerings. Purple fruits with tough rinds, something resembling dried meat strips, and a paste in a small container. After quickly smelling each item, he took a small bite of the fruit, finding it surprisingly sweet with a citrus aftertaste. The meat was gamey but palatable. The paste he avoided after noticing its chemical smell. The observers seemed surprised when he nodded appreciation toward them. One made notes while the other stared openly at him. "First human in our collection," whispered the younger one. "The arena master will pay well for viewing rights, if it survives assessment," the other replied. "Remember the Terulian? Brilliant mathematician, terrible survival instincts." They moved on, but Jun's stomach tightened. Assessment. Arena master. These terms suggested testing that went beyond mere observation. That night, while the ship's lights dimmed to simulate night cycle, Jun began planning. Unlike the creatures thrashing helplessly in neighboring cells, he understood that escape required patience and information. So he watched, remembered, and waited. He noticed the guard rotations occurred precisely every 4 hours. The night shift was smaller, with only 3 Huntresses patrolling the entire specimen wing. The energy barriers were controlled from a central station, but each cell also had an emergency override panel, likely requiring Sci-Fi biometric authorization. By the second day, Jun had established a routine. He exercised methodically in the morning, ate when fed, and responded to simple gestured commands during basic intelligence tests. He demonstrated problem-solving abilities but carefully avoided showing his full capabilities. The Sci-Fi began talking more freely around him, assuming he couldn't understand. Specimen 12H displays unusual patience, Rhea told her colleagues during the evening observation. Most new captures expend energy on futile escape attempts. Could indicate low intelligence, suggested another. Or high intelligence, countered Rhea. Notice how it studies us when it thinks we aren't looking. How it catalogs the other specimens. This one observes before acting. On the third day, Jun's careful observations paid off. During a routine check, he overheard Tala discussing the assessment protocol. Begin adaptation tests tomorrow. Start with environmental challenges, then combat reflexes. Combat? With what species? Asked Rhea. The juvenile Krivak needs exercise, Tala replied casually. Jun had seen the Krivak in a reinforced cell at the corridor's end, a predatory creature with multiple limbs ending in razor-sharp claws. That night, as the ship hummed with reduced activity, Jun reviewed everything he'd learned. The Sci-Fi were hunters, collectors of biological specimens from across the galaxy. They valued cunning and strength, and tomorrow they planned to test his survival abilities against a creature evolved to kill. He smiled slightly in the darkness. They still didn't realize they were being studied just as carefully as they studied him. The Huntresses had captured a scientist, but they would soon discover they'd brought aboard something they hadn't anticipated. A human who refused to be mere prey. Jun survived the combat test with the juvenile Krivak through quick thinking and improvised weapons. He used the creature's multiple eyes against it, creating a bright reflection that confused it long enough for him to demonstrate defensive rather than offensive skills. The Sci-Fi were impressed. Most specimens either died quickly or showed mindless aggression. After proving his worth, Jun's living conditions improved. His cell was upgraded with more space and basic amenities. They provided him with soil beds containing local plants, supposedly to study his agricultural knowledge. Jun recognized the opportunity immediately. Within weeks, he had established his own small ecosystem. Using shards from his food trays and fibers from his bedding, he crafted simple tools to tend the plants. He created a calendar on his cell wall using a pigment extracted from one of the purple fruits, tracking the ship's movement by the changing star patterns visible through his small viewport. Duma, the clan's scientist, became his most frequent observer. Her copper scales had a distinctive pattern that reminded Jun of Earth's tiger stripes. Unlike the others, she watched him with genuine curiosity rather than merely assessing his value. The human creates order from chaos, she noted to her assistant one day. Look how he has arranged the growing things according to their light requirements. Jun pretended not to understand, but internally he smiled. His careful demonstration of intelligence, never too much, never too little, was working. The Sci-Fi were beginning to see him as more than just another specimen. On the 37th day, according to his wall calendar, Duna approached his cell alone. She carried a data tablet and stood awkwardly for a moment before speaking. "You make things." "From nothing," she said in halting English. The pronunciation was strange but understandable. Jun looked up from the irrigation system he was creating using hollow plant stems. He decided it was time to reveal more of his abilities. "Not from nothing," he replied in the Sci-Fi language, his pronunciation careful but clear. "I use what is available." Duna's crest rose in surprise, the scales along her neck flaring briefly. You speak our language. I learn, he said simply, tapping his ear to indicate his translation implant. Not perfect. Remarkable, she whispered, making rapid notes on her tablet. No specimen has ever learned our language so quickly. For the next week, Duna visited daily, bringing increasingly complex materials for June to work with. She tested his problem-solving abilities, linguistic skills, and knowledge of various sciences. June measured his responses carefully, showing enough to maintain interest, but never revealing his full capabilities. Other Serethi began to take notice. Warriors would pause at his cell, watching as he constructed increasingly sophisticated tools and systems. He overheard their discussions. Many were impressed, others concerned about a specimen showing such adaptability. It constructs weapons, one warrior noted, watching as June fashioned a small cutting tool. No, Duna corrected. It constructs tools. There is a difference. On the 45th day, disaster struck. The ship lurched violently, throwing June against his cell wall. Alarms blared as emergency lighting bathed the corridors in pulsing red. Through the commotion, he heard the distinctive roar of a large predator. Containment breach in Section 7. The announcement echoed through the ship. Cerulean alpha male has escaped. June had seen the Cerulean during exercise periods, a massive six-limbed predator with naturally armored skin and razor-sharp claws. The Serethi had captured it on a death world where it was an apex predator. Even their skilled hunters approached its cell cautiously. The sounds of combat echoed down the corridor, shrieks, roars, and the distinctive discharge of energy weapons. Then came a high-pitched scream that was unmistakably from a young Serethi. Peering through his barrier, Jun saw a small figure dart into view, pursued by the massive shadow of the Cerulean. It was Mira, one of the juvenile Serethi who sometimes assisted with feeding duties. She had no weapons, and the adult warriors were nowhere in sight. Jun didn't hesitate. He grabbed his water container and bedding, then pounded on his cell barrier to draw attention. Mira, here. The young Serethi spotted him and changed direction, racing toward his cell with the predator close behind. As she reached the control panel, Jun shouted, "Emergency override." Press the red sensor. Mira slapped the panel. The barrier between them flickered momentarily, just enough for Jun to thrust his water container through. It shattered at the Cerulean's feet, spreading liquid across the corridor floor. In the same motion, Jun tossed his bedding material into the spreading puddle. The predator slipped on the sudden slick surface, its momentum carrying it past Mira. As it struggled to regain footing, Jun called to Mira. The control panel. Yellow sequence. Security lockdown. The young Serethi understood, quickly entering the command sequence. Metal barriers slammed down at both ends of the corridor section, trapping the Cerulean but keeping it separated from them. By the time the warrior team arrived, they found Mira safe, the predator contained, and Jun back in his cell, as if nothing had happened. The young Serethi excitedly explained how the human had saved her and helped trap the escaped predator. Tala, leading the security team, stared at Jun with new eyes. "You could have escaped," she said finally. Jun shrugged. Mira was in danger, but she is not of your kind. Does that matter? Jun asked simply. The news spread quickly through the ship. Huntresses gathered outside his cell, observing him with new interest. The humans saved Mira, they whispered among themselves. No specimen has ever protected a Serethi before. That evening, Duna returned with Tala and several high-ranking warriors. They deactivated his cell barrier completely. "You are no longer classified as a high-risk specimen," Tala announced formally. "You will be given access to learning section during day cycles. Under supervision," she added, though her tone had lost much of its harshness. As they led him through corridors he had only glimpsed before, Jun noticed the Serethi warriors treated him differently. Not with friendship, exactly, but with something approaching respect. He had transformed from mere specimen to something they didn't quite have a classification for. Duna walked beside him, her scientific curiosity now mixed with something new. Why did you help Mira? It served no survival purpose for you. June considered his answer carefully. Humans understand something your people might find interesting. What is that? She asked. Sometimes the strongest survival strategy isn't fighting alone. Sometimes it's protecting each other. The learning section became June's new home. Though still technically a prisoner, he now had a larger space with actual furniture, access to information terminals, and permission to move within certain areas of the ship during designated hours. 2 guards always accompanied him, but they kept a respectful distance. 3 weeks after the incident with Mira, Jun was studying Sarathi star charts when raised voices echoed from the corridor. My observation period is scheduled now, Duna argued, her copper scales flashing with irritation. I have research protocols to complete. Research can wait, replied a deeper voice. Combat training takes priority. June looked up to see Hana, the clan's weapons master, facing off against Duna. Hana was taller than most Sarathi, with dark emerald scales and multiple battle scars across her arms and shoulders. A ceremonial blade hung at her hip, a sign of her elite status. The human is needed in the training arena, Hana insisted. His unusual fighting techniques during the Krivik challenge merit further study. Duna bristled. He's not just a combat specimen. His problem-solving abilities are more valuable than... Enough. A third voice cut through their argument. Both Sarathi immediately straightened as Shuri approached. With her distinctive scaring and the ornate armor that marked her as the clan's future leader, Shuri commanded immediate respect. As heir designate, I require the human's knowledge for diplomatic preparations, Shuri stated firmly. The Kresh Confederation envoy arrives in 7 cycles. Their assessment of our clan will determine hunting rights in 3 sectors. Jun watched this power struggle with careful interest. In these 3 huntresses, he recognized the key to improving his position, perhaps even securing his eventual freedom. Shuri noticed him watching and narrowed her eyes. The human understands more than he reveals, she observed. Perhaps we should ask his preference. 3 pairs of eyes turned to June, who kept his expression neutral despite his surprise. No Sarathi had ever asked a specimen's preference before. I could assist all 3 of you, he suggested calmly. Different times, different purposes. The 3 huntresses exchanged glances. This solution was so simple, none had considered it. Morning cycles for science, June continued. Mid-cycle for combat training. Evening for leadership discussions. After brief negotiations, the arrangement was approved. What Jun didn't tell them was how perfectly this schedule suited his own purposes. By dividing his time between the 3 most influential Sarathi beneath the clan mother, he would gain access to every important area of the ship and every level of their social structure. The next morning, Duna led him to her research laboratory. Unlike the stark containment areas, this space was filled with specimens, analysis equipment, and data terminals. Your cultivation methods improved plant yield by 30%, she told him, displaying growth charts. How? Human science often begins with careful observation, June explained. I noticed your plants were stressed by light levels, too much direct exposure. He showed her how to create a simple rotational system, explaining the principles of controlled experimentation. Change 1 variable at a time. Record results. Adjust. Duna absorbed this information eagerly. Our hunting has always relied on instinct and tradition. This methodical approach could revolutionize our resource management. By mid-cycle, Jun found himself in the training arena with Hana. The weapons master circled him, assessing his form as he demonstrated basic defensive stances. Your species is physically weaker than Sarathi, she noted bluntly. Yet you survived encounters that killed stronger specimens. Humans don't rely on strength alone, Jun replied. We use leverage, momentum, and an opponent's weight against them. He demonstrated a simple redirecting move, showing how a smaller fighter could use a larger opponent's momentum to unbalance them. Hana attempted the technique. Initially skeptical, then increasingly intrigued as she mastered the basic principle. Our warriors always seek to overpower enemies, she admitted. These precision techniques require less energy and leave fewer openings. By evening, June sat across from Shuri in her private quarters, surrounded by tactical displays and clan records. The creche respects strength above all else, she told him. I must demonstrate our clan's power or lose valuable hunting grounds. Power can be shown in many ways, June suggested, not just through combat prowess. He explained human concepts of diplomatic strength, resource management, technological advancement, cultural influence. Sometimes the strongest position is making your opponent need you more than you need them. Shuri's crest lifted in surprise. This contradicts all Sarathi tradition. Yet, there is wisdom in it. Days became weeks as this new routine solidified. With each session, Jun carefully expanded his teachings, making himself increasingly valuable to each huntress, while gaining deeper insights into Sarathi society. Duna began implementing systematic research protocols based on his guidance. Her efficiency reports impressed the clan mother, elevating her status among the scientific caste. Your methods helped us identify migration patterns we never recognized before, she told June excitedly. Our hunting success rate increased by 23% last cycle. Hannah incorporated June's defensive techniques into warrior training. Initially met with resistance, the results soon convinced even the most traditional fighters. 3 of my best students defeated opponents twice their size using your leverage principles, she reported with grudging respect. The warriors now request your presence during training sessions. Shuri perhaps showed the most dramatic transformation. Under June's guidance, she approached the creche negotiations differently, offering resource-sharing agreements rather than traditional dominance displays. The results shocked the clan. The creche offered us preferred trading status, she told June afterward. No blood was shed, yet we gained more territory than through any previous combat assertion. As their individual successes mounted, competition for June's time intensified. The structured schedule began to break down as each huntress sought additional consultation hours. The Botanical Preservation Project requires human oversight. Duna would insist, appearing during combat sessions to pull June away. The advanced defensive techniques cannot be properly demonstrated without him, Hannah would counter, interrupting research time. Clan negotiations take priority over all other activities, Shuri would declare, overriding both of them. Their rivalry reached its peak during the clan's seasonal gathering. All 3 huntresses claimed June's assistance for their presentations to visiting clan leaders. The dispute grew heated enough that the clan mother herself intervened. The human will attend all 3 presentations, she decreed. His knowledge benefits the entire clan, not individual ambitions. Later that night, as June returned to his quarters, no longer called a cell, he found all 3 huntresses waiting. Their postures were stiff, formal, a sign of serious discussion. We have been behaving like territorial juveniles, Shuri began, her usual confidence tempered with humility. Fighting over access to your knowledge rather than using it effectively, added Duna. Weakening our collective strength through division, finished Hannah. June waited, sensing a significant shift in their dynamic. We propose a collaborative council, Shuri continued, each of us contributing our specialty, with you as advisor to all. Not a prisoner, clarified Duna. Not a specimen. An ally, stated Hannah simply. June considered their offer carefully. It represented an unprecedented elevation in status, from captive to counselor. More importantly, it positioned him to influence Sarathi society in ways that might eventually benefit human-Sarathi relations. I accept, he said finally, on one condition. The 3 huntresses looked at him expectantly. That you understand I'm helping because I choose to, not because I must. True alliance requires freedom on both sides. Their agreement sealed a transformation neither June nor his captors could have imagined when a simple research expedition went wrong 3 months earlier. The prisoner had become a teacher, the specimen and advisor, and 3 rival huntresses have found common purpose in the wisdom of an alien they once considered merely prey. The collaborative council worked better than anyone expected. Within weeks, the combined knowledge of Duna's scientific approach, Hannah's combat expertise, and Shuri's leadership, all guided by June's unique human perspective, had improved clan efficiency by remarkable margins. The ship's specimens were better maintained, its warriors more effectively trained, and its resources more carefully managed. June still wore the thin metal collar that marked him as non-Serathi, but his quarters had been moved to the administrative level, and guards no longer followed his movements. He had access to most ship systems and participated in clan planning sessions as a respected voice. The human pattern recognition abilities complement our instinctual approaches, Duna explained to the clan mother during one such session. Combined, they produce superior outcomes. The clan mother, an ancient Serathi with faded scales and eyes that missed nothing, simply nodded. She watched June with careful interest, but rarely addressed him directly. Life settled into a productive routine. June spent mornings with Duna refining research protocols, mid-cycles training alongside Hannah's warriors, and evenings developing strategic plans with Shuri. At night, he worked on his personal project, a comprehensive translator to bridge the gap between human and Serathi languages. He hoped it might eventually facilitate formal relations between their species. The attack came without warning. June woke to blaring alarms and flickering lights. The ship lurched violently, throwing him from his sleeping platform. Emergency announcements echoed through the corridors. Incomprehensible in the chaos, but the tone conveyed clear danger. His door panel flashed red, then green, then went completely dark as power fluctuated. When he pressed his hand against it, the door slid open. The security systems were failing. The corridor outside was in chaos. Junior clan members rushed past, carrying equipment and weapons. No one paid him any attention, an unprecedented situation that confirmed the severity of the emergency. June checked the nearest information terminal, but it displayed only error messages. He needed to find Duna, Hannah, or Shuri to understand what was happening. More importantly, he realized with sudden clarity he needed to help them. The barrier to his quarters had failed. For the first time since his capture, nothing prevented him from simply walking to an escape pod and leaving. Freedom, the goal he had worked toward for months, was suddenly available. Yet he hesitated. A massive explosion rocked the ship. The lights failed completely before emergency systems bathed everything in dim red illumination. Through a viewport, June glimpsed another vessel, sleeker and more predatory than the clan ship, attached to their lower hull. Boarding action, he muttered. Another clan. The Serathi often raided each other, seeking valuable specimens and technology. Making his decision, Jun ran, not toward the escape pods, but toward the command center. His knowledge of ship systems might prove crucial. 2 guards blocked his path at the command-level entrance. Return to containment, one ordered, raising her weapon. Listen to me, Jun said urgently. The attackers will target the ventilation system. It bypasses your security barriers. The guards hesitated, but before they could respond, the door behind them slid open. Shuri stood there, her armor splattered with blood, a fresh cut across her shoulder. Let him pass, she ordered. Inside the command center, displays showed the battle unfolding across multiple decks. The rival clan, identifiable by their distinctive silver-patterned scales, had breached 3 entry points and was moving methodically toward the specimen containment areas. The Nishik clan, Shuri explained grimly. They specialize in acquiring rare specimens. They must have tracked our collection activities. They're after me, Jun realized. The first human specimen. Among other prizes, Duna confirmed, working frantically at a terminal. They've already breached secondary containment. If they reach the primary specimen vault. Some of the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy were housed there. If released, they could destroy both clans and the ship itself. Why would you help us? Shuri asked June directly. Your restraint systems are offline. You could escape during the chaos. June met her gaze steadily. Because I choose to. Without further debate, they integrated him into their defense planning. June worked with Duma to reconfigure security systems, rerouting power to create containment fields at strategic junctions. If we polarize these corridor sections, he suggested, pointing to the ship schematic, we can channel them into ambush zones here and here. Hana nodded appreciatively. My warriors can set up crossfire positions at these intersections. Shuri studied the plan, then made her decision. Execute it. Hana, coordinate with section leaders. Duma, implement the containment fields. June. She paused, clearly unused to giving direct orders to a non-Serathi. I'll help Duna with the technical implementation, he offered, then join the secondary defense line. The battle unfolded over the next 3 hours. The Nishek warriors were skilled and determined, but they faced something they hadn't anticipated. Coordinated defense based on a hybrid of Serathi instinct and human strategic planning. June worked alongside Duma to lock down critical systems, then joined a warrior team defending the approach to the specimen vault. His combat training with Hana proved valuable as he directed defenders to optimum positions and identified weaknesses in the attackers' formations. They're using standard Serathi pack hunting formations, he told the team leader. They expect you to defend the center. Instead, strengthen your flanks and let them penetrate slightly before closing the trap. The tactic worked perfectly. The Nishek warriors, expecting traditional defense patterns, found themselves outmaneuvered and surrounded. What should have been a successful raid turned into a costly defeat. By the time the ship's primary lighting restored, the Nishek forces were in full retreat. They disconnected their boarding craft and fled, leaving behind their dead and wounded. The clan gathered in the Great Hall to assess damages and casualties. 12 warriors had died defending the ship, with many more wounded, but they had protected their specimens, their technology, and their clan honor. The clan mother moved slowly through the hall, acknowledging the efforts of her people. When she reached June, who stood somewhat apart with Duma, Hana, and Shuri, the chamber fell silent. She was ancient even by Serathi standards. Her once vibrant scales now faded to pale copper. Her eyes, however, remained sharp and piercing. You fought for the clan, she stated, her voice carrying in the silence. I did, June replied simply. Though you could have escaped. Yes, the clan mother studied him for a long moment. Then, with ceremonial slowness, she reached out and touched the thin metal collar around his neck. It detached with a soft click, falling into her hand. No prisoner, she declared, her voice ringing through the hall. No specimen. She turned to address the gathered clan. Advisor. A murmur ran through the assembled Serathi. Such an elevation in status for a non-Serathi was unprecedented. The human exemplifies qualities our legends speak of but rarely witness, the clan mother continued. Intelligence wielded with wisdom, strength tempered by restraint, liberty chosen for purpose rather than impulse. She turned back to June. You have earned a place among us, if you choose to accept it. June looked at the 3 Huntresses who had transformed from his captors to his colleagues, perhaps even to friends. Then he looked at the collar in the clan mother's hand, the symbol of captivity now broken. I accept, he said, as an equal, not a possession. As an equal, the clan mother agreed, and the first of your kind to join a Serathi clan by choice rather than capture. As dawn cycle illuminated the Great Hall, June realized the attack had accomplished what months of careful work had only begun. The prisoner had become an ally, the specimen an advisor, and a human had found unexpected kinship among the stars. The news spread quickly through Serathi space. A human had become advisor to the Terek clan, elevated by the clan mother herself. Other clans reacted with mixtures of disbelief, outrage, and curiosity. Some dismissed it as a desperate move by a weakening clan. Others sent observers to witness this unprecedented development. June embraced his new role with characteristic adaptability. He wore Serathi-styled clothing adapted for his human frame, learned their ceremonial combat forms, and continued perfecting his command of their complex language. The respect he received from clan members increased daily as his contributions yielded tangible benefits. 3 months after the Nishek attack, the clan mother summoned June to her private chambers, an honor rarely granted even to high-ranking Serathi. "Your presence has changed us," she said without preamble. Her chambers were sparse but elegant, decorated with artifacts from countless worlds. Some say for better, others for worse. "Change is rarely comfortable," Jun replied carefully. The clan mother made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Indeed, yet necessary for survival." She activated a holographic display showing various clan ships across Serathi territory. The Tarak were once among the most conservative clans. Now we are viewed as dangerous innovators. "Is that why you summoned me?" "Partially." She gestured to another display showing a distant sector of space. "We've detected an unusual energy signature. Analysis suggests it matches known human propulsion systems." June felt his heart rate increase. A human vessel? Here. Approaching slowly, cautiously. Her eyes studied him carefully. "Did you signal them?" He met her gaze directly. "No, but I maintain the emergency beacon in my research equipment. Standard protocol for all field scientists." The clan mother nodded slowly. "I suspected as much. Your loyalty to the clan does not erase your connection to your own kind. Just as your acceptance of me doesn't erase Serathi tradition," Jun countered. Another sound, definitely a laugh this time. "Well spoken. The question remains, what shall we do about this human vessel?" "We could hide," Jun suggested. "Activate stealth systems and avoid contact." "We could capture them," she offered. "Add more human specimens to our collection. Or," Jun said carefully, "we could initiate diplomatic contact. The first official meeting between our species." The clan mother's crest raised slightly, a sign of interest. "Bold, unprecedented, like having a human advisor." "Indeed." She considered for a long moment. "Prepare your council. We will receive these humans as guests, not prey. A first in Serathi history." The preparations consumed the next week. Duna researched human diplomatic protocols, Hana trained warriors in non-threatening escort formations, and Shuri drafted formal greetings with Jun's guidance. The entire clan buzzed with nervous energy. When the human research vessel finally came within visual range, it was smaller than expected. A scientific exploration craft rather than a military vessel. "They're scanning us," reported the sensor technician. "Weapons systems are powered down." "Open a communication channel," Shuri ordered, glancing at Jun for confirmation. He nodded, suddenly feeling the weight of history. This encounter could shape human-Serathi relations for generations. The view screen activated, revealing a startled human face, a woman with dark skin and commander's insignia. "This is Captain Maya Rodriguez of the Earth Sciences vessel Galileo," she began formally, then stopped in shock. "Dr. Park, is that you?" Jun stepped forward. "Hello, Captain. Yes, it's me." Her expression cycled through disbelief, relief, and confusion as she took in his Serathi-styled clothing and the alien warriors surrounding him. "We tracked your emergency beacon. We thought you were a prisoner." "I was," Jun replied honestly. "Now I'm an advisor to the Tarak clan, and hopefully the first ambassador between our species." The following days were tense but productive. Captain Rodriguez and a small team boarded the clan ship under elaborate safety protocols. They were received in the Great Hall by the clan mother herself, with full ceremonial honors traditionally reserved for allied clan leaders. "We never imagined first contact would happen this way," Rodriguez confessed during a private moment with Jun. "A xenobiologist captured and then adopted. Integration through immersion," Jun replied with a smile. "Sometimes the best way to understand a culture is to live it." After 2 weeks of careful negotiations, a framework for future relations was established. The humans would provide technological and scientific knowledge. The Serethi would offer access to their vast experience with countless alien species and previously unexplored regions of space. When the time came for the Galileo to depart, June faced his most difficult decision. "You could return with us," Captain Rodriguez offered. "Earth will want your full report, and your family believes you're dead." Duna, Hana, and Shuri watched silently, their expressions carefully neutral despite the tension evident in their postures. "I propose an alternative," Jun said finally. "I'll split my time. 6 standard months with Earth, 6 with the Tarek clan. A true ambassador must understand both worlds." The clan mother nodded her approval. Wisdom in balance. 6 months later, Jun prepared for his first return to Earth. A small human diplomatic vessel waited in the docking bay. His quarters had been emptied of essential belongings, his research archived, his responsibilities temporarily reassigned. Yet as he walked toward the docking bay, he found his path blocked by a familiar trio. "I will escort the advisor," Duna stated firmly. "His scientific work must be properly explained to human researchers." "Combat protocol requires security escort," countered Hana. "I have prepared appropriate honor guards. As future clan leader, diplomatic transitions fall under my authority," Shuri interrupted, her newly received leadership regalia gleaming. June suppressed a smile. Some things never changed. "Perhaps all 3 of you could accompany me to the docking bay," he suggested diplomatically. They agreed with obvious reluctance, each taking position around him as they walked. Clan members they passed offered respectful gestures, to all 4 of them equally, Jun noted with satisfaction. At the airlock, the clan mother waited with a small ceremonial box. "For your journey," she said, presenting it to him. Inside lay a scale pattern medallion bearing the clan insignia, the highest recognition a non-Serathi could receive. "You transformed a prisoner into an advisor," she stated. "But more importantly, you transformed hunters into diplomats." June accepted the medallion with appropriate Serathi gestures of respect. "The transformation works both ways. I am not the same person who was captured a year ago. Return to us with new knowledge," the clan mother instructed. "We will be hunting in the Torellian sector when your human duties conclude." As June boarded the human vessel, he glanced back at the 3 Huntresses who had changed from his captors to his colleagues to his friends. Duna nodded respectfully. Hana thumped her chest in a warrior's salute. Shuri simply raised her hand in the human gesture of farewell he had taught her. The human diplomatic officer beside him shook his head in amazement. "I can't believe we're establishing formal relations with a species that was hunting humans as specimens a year ago." "The greatest strength of both our species," Jun replied as the airlock sealed, "is our capacity to adapt, to transform." As the ship detached from the clan vessel, Jun watched the massive hunter ship recede through the viewport. He had 6 months to prepare humanity for formal contact with the Serethi, just as he had prepared the Tarek clan for humanity. He touched the clan medallion now hanging around his neck. The prisoner had become an ambassador. The specimen had become a bridge between worlds. And 3 fierce huntresses had learned there was more than one way to capture something valuable. Not through force or cages, but through respect, adaptation, and the most powerful tool of all, transformation.